Hey, welcome to Leaders with Leverage. I'm your host, Susie, and I have a special guest. This is a solo episode, but I have a plus one. I brought a friend. And this is a behind the scenes. I'm starting to do some coaching conversations, but instead of having a client with me, I have a fellow coach, Micah Librant. Hi,
Thank
Micah.
you. Oh my gosh, I'm happy to be here and to be behind the scenes.
Yeah, behind the scenes. We're going to talk about the question that we always get from clients about leadership. And so you and I talked about this, and what's hilarious is, like you always do, you're able to like bring this all around and give us some great takeaways from this. So I'm setting you up
Oh, thank you. I'm
to
pretty excited. I think you set me up very well. Maybe we set each other up together. Is that it tends to
fair.
be whenever we meet, we will talk for a couple seconds and then all of a sudden it becomes curriculum. So this
That's
is hot off
true.
the press.
Hot off the press. You'll be talking about this for months. But so what the question that we often get is, what skill, and make sure I ask the question that you think we get the most. What skills do I need to be a great leader or to progress in my career as a leader?
Yeah, that is the question. And sometimes it's disguised as, do I have what it takes?
Mm-hmm.
I coach, I spend a lot of my time coaching executives, and my sweet spot, I would say, is helping people who are really owning that executive space, whether or not they are new to the position. I think that's also so maybe the question also disguises itself as, how do I own the space that I'm in? And it tends to come as a concern that they're lacking something, a concern that there
Yeah.
is, I think, can I read this book? What else can I do? What am
Yeah.
I missing in order to become this better leader?
Yeah. And I think it comes from I want to be comfortable and confident, but leadership is really about being uncomfortable. You never know how things land with people. You're not sure the impact you have, and you almost need to do your best and then just show up as much as you can, because sometimes it feels just not satisfying every day. Would you
Mm,
agree with that?
yeah, and you know what? When you're trying to fill that void, that unsatisfying void,
Hmm.
with skill, with knowledge, with something you can acquire, people know. It
Hmm.
shows. And you and I work with leaders all the time. I bet we can pick out those who, in a second, are really embodying that sort of willing followership, the leader who, even without a title, people tend to turn to.
Hmm.
I think they tend to be more hopeful than others.
Hmm.
They tend to be more comfortable in their own skin. And there are some things, and I'm happy we can talk about this, because I feel like there are some things that they do on purpose that I used to think was just a ingrained, you've got it or you don't. But the more I work with leaders, the more I realize, oh, there are some common practices that the very best do, I think, dedicate themselves to.
Yeah. But when you Google, like, what skills do you need to be a leader? And it says being able to be a strategic thinker, being able to do these concepts, like, how do you then, like, are those things that you figure out who you are first and those things come naturally? Or like, are those more tactics and this is how you embody who you are and how you show up in front of people?
Well, first of all, what in the world does strategic mean? Can we just can we just
So,
admit for a second that that is like the most expensive word on LinkedIn is
totally.
strategic? What does it mean? You think? Does it mean you have an
Yeah,
alternative? Does it mean
good
you're
point.
in on the conversations that other people are not in on? Especially when we're working with Clifton strengths, or one of those strengths is called strategic, and even a fourth of the strengths are classified as somehow being more strategic than the rest of them, people clamor over
Yeah.
being called strategic. And if I did this a few weeks ago, I asked a room of 800 people, okay, what does strategic mean? I asked them to turn to the people next to them, and I could not get them back. Now, if there was a universal definition of what this meant,
Yeah.
that would have been a really quick, it would have been like people reciting a verse
So
that they knew the
true.
answer to.
Gosh.
But it led to such, vibrant conversations. We don't have a unified definition of what that means. And
Yeah,
I think it's, again, we're trying to grab something that we don't have from that
totally.
desire of like, there's got to be something I can acquire. There's got to
Yeah.
be a class I can take, a book I can read.
Hmm.
So to your question, Susie, I I do think there are important skills, and we will talk specifically about one of them here in the middle of our acronym. Um, but for the most part, I think what's enduring, what's going to last the trend, and I don't say trend in a bad way, there are shifts in economic realities and social justice realities that change what people need. But there's surfing the trend of what our followers need. And that might mean that you need to be more critical or have tougher negotiation skills or learn different ways to show up with your presence in front of different audiences. Or if you're a global leader, there's the learned application of what's going to translate across cultures.
Yeah.
How do I know who the important sports teams are to different teams? Like, those are all things that you can add to your toolkit that you probably should. And what's enduring the test of time and the test of trend is that embodiment of, I think, your mindset.
Yeah. And you know what? It makes our point completely, because strategic is like a glowing platitude, like you said. It's just this concept. And because we can't define it, we're in search of it all the time. And that's the problem. We're in search of something that isn't us. So tell us about your acronym, and what are those things? What are the things that people can really think about in listening to this, about how to become the leader they need to become?
Thank you. So behind the scenes, Susie, this is not my acronym. This is ours.
Okay, fair
We
enough.
together came up with this about 10 seconds before we came live.
And it's brilliant. I have to say, it's brilliant.
It also might be the proof that I have come fully out of the corporate experience, given what this word is. This acronym might be the least corporate thing I've ever said. I'm about to celebrate my 1-year anniversary of being in a private practice. And
Wow.
I had a client the other day tell me, Micah, when we first met you, you were pretty good at walking the corporate line. And I think I'm taking this as the compliment that it was intended, but they were like, you have just blossomed into, a whole new animal. So here's my non-corporate acronym that Susie also owns 50% of. It's HUG.
Hug. Oh, you can hear the audience going,
yeah, or they're going, what the hell? Like, really? Can't tell people that. HUG. Here's what it stands for. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Blossom into a different beast. HUG is H is for humility, which is knowing who you're not and letting it go. Like, instead of identifying your deficit and finding a class to fill it with, humility is knowing who you're not and embracing it by not trying to be that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about all three of these.
Okay.
You, and for those of you who can't see, I'm signing in ASL right now. You, which looks a lot like it's 2 fingers up if you want to sign it. U stands for understanding. And this is the more skill of the 3, because it is pursuing constantly clarity of communication. So this is giving and receiving feedback, understanding the difference between feedback and insult, and leveraging the skill of communication to promote understanding for yourself and for those around you. And G is grace. And we're going to define grace today as really, truly leaning into the talents that you've been given. Understanding their extent, but also realizing that your greatest contribution comes from doubling down on who you are. HUG.
I love that so much, because it really does give you permission to just kind of understand how you're showing up and not compare yourself to something else. Just let all that go.
Susie, I listened to one of your solo episodes this morning before I entered a pretty high stakes negotiation, like literal. It was textbook negotiation. I was finalizing a contract with a client. And I was like, I don't know what I need. I feel a little bit out of sorts. Like, I have 15 minutes. I'm going to let Susie tell me what to do. So I think we can do that right now. And I think we can make this acronym be something that gets you into that mindset before you walk into a high stakes situation.
Oh, okay. I love that.
So humility right now, I mean, take notes. Who are you not in this situation? And you could study that by saying, who have you tried to be and failed? What sort of persona or attitude do you feel most anxious around owning? I'll use an example of myself this morning. Right before I went into this negotiation, I thought, I need to be a negotiator.
Yeah.
And I could feel my shoulders change
Mhm.
posture. I felt my vision literally narrow, my focus kind of dialed in, and then I didn't know what to dial it in on because I'm not a super focused person. I tend to, pick up all of the things that my pores are exposed to all the way around me. And I got really nervous and not good nervous. So if I were doing this exercise right now, I would say humility, who I'm not, is for me specifically, um, very serious. I don't think serious people come up with an acronym called HUG. I'm not very serious. I'm not going to be the best at nailing the details.
Yeah.
I'm not energized by following up on things that are ongoing.
Yeah.
Um, Once something has left idea state, I tend to sort of let it go. It's knowing who you're not. That's humility. So, right now, if you're listening, write down who you know that you're not.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you also just to study the moments when you have been successful, what was missing?
Yeah.
What is it that you try to do over and over again? And it feels heavy because if it's heavy, you can lay it down. There's
Yeah.
enough good work to be done and enough good people to do the work that you really can lean into who you are. But that means you got to know what you're leaving behind.
Yeah. I have to so I'm thinking of one example that I kind of like thought through is when I was resigning from one of my after working for this woman for 10 years, was sick and I took cold medicine. And I thought, oh, this is great because I'll be kind of numb to it. So I won't go through the emotions. And what happened was it wasn't me.
Mm,
And so a couple hours after they had escorted me out because it was that kind of situation, she'd called me mad at me, yelling at me, "What is wrong? You're not telling me something." Because I wasn't myself. I wasn't my outgoing natural self. So she didn't trust me.
wow.
And so it was in the moment, how do you become who you are? And it might not feel comfortable, but you have to come to terms with who you genuinely are and having the humility to understand that.
You know, so my undergrad's in broadcasting, and I spent a little bit of one of my lifetimes as a news reporter. And one of my favorite professors in undergrad would catch me when I was trying to make a script too wordy. And she'd say, first of all, just read it out loud. And then she'd stop me and she'd look at me and she'd be essentially my counterbalance. And she'd say, what are you trying to say? What are you really trying to say? And I mean, thinking about you in the cold medicine moment, like that's what we all fall into, is that almost alluring trap of being somebody you're not, trying to put something on top of it. And if you
Mhm.
just pause and say, okay, what am I really trying to say?
Yes.
Then what you discard is another clue to where you can be humble. I recently mapped my Clifton Strengths profile against a colleague's, and man, that was a dose of humility. I at first it was such a reminder that we have to be so patient with how vulnerable some of these assessments can make us, because I was comparing all my 34 to this other person's full 34. And given the complexity of that instrument, it's bound to be pointing out our differences. That's what it's
Mhm.
designed to do. I found at first, anytime I found some similarity, I was like, ooh, they're going to like me. I'm just like them. And then I realized, oh my gosh, the further I go, like past number 3, it starts to point out where we're different. And I had this reaction of, oh no, they're going to find me out. They're going
Yeah.
to find out that I'm not the same as them. And so before I even shared, I journaled for myself of like, okay, where are our specific differences? This person had high context, which means they're taking clues from the past. I don't have that anywhere. And I felt afraid and almost proactively ashamed of not being wired that way, because I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to find out that I don't think exactly like them. And then what are they going to think? And then how am I going to surprise and delight them? And how am I going to serve them? And I had to take a breath and name, you're right. I am not going to be that way. I'm not going to show up naturally that way. But isn't it so much better if I don't try? Because then it allows me to leverage them.
Gosh, as you were talking, I'm thinking, even Micah, like I know you hear that a lot because you a lot of people know you. You're
People
kind
are
of like a
are
star.
tremendously shocked that I'm human.
But it's so funny. It is work that we have to do on a regular basis. So having that humility
Mhm,
and being thoughtful. I love how you framed that around before you go in and
mhm.
asking that question. I think that's a powerful question that has to stay with the each acronym is what are you trying to say?
What are you really trying to say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Trina Creighton.
Thanks to Trina.
Thanks,
Trina,
Trina.
we
Trina.
appreciate you.
Should
All
we talk
right,
about
what's
you?
yeah, you. Let's talk about me.
Let's
No,
talk
let's
about
talk about
you.
you. You.
Baby. You understanding. It's that you are constantly focusing on creating understanding for yourself and for others around you, specifically through feedback. Now, somebody else said this probably on social media that I just doom scrolled past, so I don't know who said it, but it was that you need to know the difference between feedback and an insult. and,
Love
and
that.
feedback is about, and this I'm borrowing from my kids' first preschool. I would call it a bug and a wish. It is about the action. It bugged me when you, and I wish you would. A bug
Oh
and a
my
wish.
gosh, that's
Preschool,
brilliant.
preschool genius, right? The
Okay.
genius of Kitty Academy, Virginia Beach. That's where that one came from. Um, Feedback, I notice, my goodness, some of the executives who I coach are just really effectively dedicated to getting it all out on the table, to not back channeling, to speaking to the person most
Mm,
directly affected, which is the hallmark of agility too. Is go to as close to where the action is happening, and to not let things brew because like like mushrooms or kombucha when they brew things grow.
yes.
Right. But let's address through feedback. What we're looking for is understanding. And that I think is probably a skill that you could get some help with, that you get some mentorship with, that you could actually acquire. It's less
Mhm,
of a mindset, it's a commitment to is the mindset, but
mhm,
then the skill of saying, okay, here's exactly what I experienced. Here's what that did for me. Here's what I would hope a different
mhm,
action is, or even feedback about positive things.
mhm,
Here's what I experienced. Here's what that created in me, or here's what I noticed that created in others. Here's what I loved about it.
mhm,
Um, but I think it's knowing the difference between feedback, which is about the action, and insult, which is about the person.
mm,
And very often, in my experience, Susie, our insults are silent. They are, I'm not going to give you
mm.
feedback,
Yes.
which instantly makes it about the person.
Yeah.
I mean, one hallmark of a toxic workplace is that you don't receive feedback
Mhm,
on negative performance, which is even more detrimental than not receiving feedback on positive performance.
mhm,
Because if that spirals into that space where you can predict that you will never actually be told if you messed up, you'll just be
mhm,
moved off of the project, or you just won't be asked back. That's that's not only a lack of feedback, that then translates it to an insult.
mhm,
So I think there is that tremendously important leadership skill of
mhm.
promoting understanding and realizing that understanding and clarity of communication is in fact your whole job.
Yeah.
It's more important than what you get out of it
Yeah.
is how you develop through it and how you help other people develop through it. And it is by
Yeah.
promoting understanding. Isn't it good that there was a verb? Otherwise, this
Yeah.
wouldn't have been hug.
Yeah. So glad there is. Yeah, and, I recently read a stat around we believe people understand us to, like, 80+% in everything we say, but the reality is more like 20.
Oh,
And so really being thoughtful about that recipient and the words. And when you said the cultivating things grow, it can grow
mhm.
here too.
Oh
And
yeah.
the emotion and, "Oh my gosh, I can't talk to them about that," and, "Is it gonna be a difficult conversation?" All those, once you allow that to brew, you're creating a different narrative, and it
Yeah.
probably will get more to insult because there's been so much emotion and so much built up in you.
And I found it's also the leader's job to pay attention to the best environment for understanding to happen.
Mhm.
Um, People are not going to hear even 20% if they feel threatened in any way. And
Totally.
those threats commonly come from if they feel like their um, role is at stake. If they feel
Mhm.
like and that could be a role at work. That could also be like, how much do you love me?
Mhm.
in a partnership? Are you gonna, if they feel
Yeah.
like the communication in that moment is somehow going to threaten future frequency of communication? And so I think it is almost showing up like a coach would, or like a great teacher would,
Mhm.
of, or even I was a lifeguard for 6 years. They teach us to assess the scene before you jump in and save somebody's life. Like, is this a place where understanding is ripe to happen? And if it's not, having the patience to say, let's come back later, and the discipline to actually return later.
I was a lifeguard too, and they didn't teach us that. I think they just taught us to jump in, which I don't think is like the best practice. So now I'm kind of questioning. I might have to go back to them, you know.
I have some notes, a bug and a wish.
I think that's really good, and also having that understanding of that, understanding those conditions. So
Mhm.
even saying and understanding outside of the feedback, how do you like to get feedback?
Oh,
What's the
yeah.
best condition? Have that conversation outside of that so that
That's
you
something I
can.
learned from you. I've heard you say, "Hey, when it's a high stakes conversation, do you need to seed the conversation ahead of time? Do you need to
Mhm.
have some?" like, There's always a friendlier, calmer alternative. I
Mhm.
mean, and it might be, I want to talk to you about something that might be hard. Here's
Yep.
what it is, or let me know when you're ready.
Yep. Totally. That okay, and I think that goes to your last one.
It does. G is grace.
How good you are.
Good. G could have been anything, so I'm going to define it however I want. We went with grace, and it is acknowledging the talents that you have. Maybe G could also be gifts. It's
Mm.
the grace of sharing your
Yeah.
talents, the grace of saying, I am not like anyone else, and I'm forgiving myself for who I am, and I'm offering who I am on purpose. Originally, when we were playing this one, we thought about courage, we thought about bravery, but hug is much better. So we went with grace.
Yeah.
And it's, have some grace. Don't expect yourself to be perfect. Um, and lean into who you are, because your imperfections are probably your talents, your strengths. They're probably what you've been told you do too much of. They're probably what you've been told you default to too easily. That's all your, where your superpowers lie. And so if you're really going to bridge that gap from being a good leader to a better leader, it is about knowing when to raise your hand and then raising it really, really high.
It keeps coming to mind as you were saying that too, is we talk a lot about courage and vulnerability and leadership. And this acronym actually allows you to have the framework to be that
Yeah.
because you're not trying to do something that isn't yours.
Oh my gosh. So I can make this real in a second
Good.
by using shopping as an
I
example.
love it.
So I struggled to figure out what the wardrobe was post COVID.
Mm.
I showed up at my first speaking gig in, well, my first private practice speaking gig last November. And I packed a suitcase full of what I would have worn to show up in a corporate space pre COVID. And I was so overdressed and inappropriately dressed. Not like sexy inappropriate, but like, what are you wearing? They're all in tennis shoes, sort of inappropriate. And I was just trying to be something that I wasn't, because
Yeah.
not only was it not right for the situation, it just wasn't me. I was so used to dressing in what I thought was the uniform
Yeah.
of somebody else.
Yeah.
And I'm real good at chameleoning myself. I know that when you go to DC, you wear a lot more black than when you go to the West Coast. Like
Yeah.
there's expectations. But the grace that I have now is, I just landed a really cool agreement with a client that I'm excited about. And to celebrate, I ordered the denim jumpsuit that I've been eyeing for 3 months
Nice.
because I knew that I could show up and it would feel like me. In fact, it would feel almost aspirationally more like me
Oh,
than what I had been wearing to present myself as what I thought they wanted me to be.
wow. Wow. That's super interesting to think about.
Right? It's
Yeah.
knowing what you are gravitationally pulled toward. And that is how you think, how you build relationships, what it takes for you to create trust and intimacy, um, who you're with when you're most yourself, and what they honor in you. knowing when does time disappear in a good way? What are you spending it doing? What would your friends say you are at your core? It's just paying attention to energy, and it doesn't matter which assessment you're using to do it, as long as it promotes the integrity of a human. But all of these personality assessments, really at their core, are paying attention to energy. And when are you in a space where your energy feels charged, where where you feel like there's light behind your eyes? For me, it's in a new denim jumpsuit. But it's about what the jumpsuit represents. It's the grace of saying, I'm the type of person who shows up like this.
Yeah. I love the light behind your eyes, the blooming.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you said it? Light behind your eyes?
I think so.
We'll rewind. We'll let you know. All right. So remind us, let's bring it back around. Like, remind us how to frame up hug for us, and then go back through the 3.
Are you just asking for me to like jump through the screen and hug you?
I,
Frame
I
up hug.
was-
All right, here we go. H is humility. It's knowing who you're not and it's not trying to be it. It's cultivating great partners who can fill in your gaps. And it is catching yourself when you're trying to put on a persona that doesn't fit you. It's also realizing you're worthy of a custom fit, right? Like you don't have to fake it. There's enough other people to be good at that other stuff. You is understanding that it is your commitment and perhaps your entire job as a leader to create understanding and promote clarity. That means that you're honing the skill of giving and receiving feedback, and that you're not letting things fester, but that you're realizing not only is there enough good people to do enough good work that you don't have to be good at everything, there's also enough good people out there that nobody has to guess. Let's trust each other by open sourcing our information through feedback and understanding. And then G is grace. It's giving yourself the permission to be exactly who you are, and also continually studying that. Imagine if you could debrief a high stakes instance based on hug, where you maybe get a coach or a friend who was there in the room with you who says, hey, in that last meeting, when did I demonstrate humility by handing the microphone to somebody else, or by asking for expert advice that was not mine, or by saying I don't know when I don't know? And when could have I leaned further in to not trying to force myself into a shape that doesn't custom fit me? You could debrief around you. Hey, what did we do that promoted understanding? When were there moments of clarity? It's great to have a friend in the room, literally or metaphorically, who has their eyes on the influence that you're creating. I've asked people before, like, hey, when was the moment that you saw some eyes light up, some ahas happen, some real change in the experience? And studying your clarity of understanding after the event is important. And then G is grace. It's again, you could do this as a debrief. What did you notice about me in that meeting? What do you want more of from me? I've assigned coaching clients in the past who are going into big high stakes situations. I've said, go back to people that you have impressed in the past and ask them what an ideal person in this role would be, and where you have a leg up on being ideal. And then how can you double down on that, even just to give yourself the language? Because it's also called grace because we cannot see our own strengths, just like you can't tickle yourself. Like I promise there's something right now that you are undervaluing about yourself that everybody thinks is pretty damn cool.
Oh my gosh. They're like so much. People need to listen to this more than once. That was so brilliant. And Micah, you just provided so many great prompts. If you're listening to this, could be something that people listen to and talk about with their teams, and just write down those prompts. I'll tell you, that's gold right there. I'm
Susie,
not just
we
saying
did
that.
this.
I'm going to write them down.
We started thinking about this less than an hour ago.
Yeah.
So here's the power of thinking out loud with someone you love.
I love you. I wish I could give you a
hug.
And none of this is prepared at all. So
No,
see, you can answer you finish my sentences for me.
Finish my sandwiches.
That too. Oh my gosh, so good. I am excited about being a co-author of Hug.
Me too.
And we're
TM.
making it okay to hug again.
Yes. Sometimes you can metaphorically hug if you're not okay. It's okay to hug
Yeah,
from 6 feet away.
fair enough. Fair enough. Well, this was our first behind the scenes.
Thank
And
you. I'm so honored.
I am super excited about this. I have a feeling that people are going to say, "Can Micah just be your plus one every time?" And my
Oh,
answer is going to be yes. I'm just saying.
my answer would be yes. Your backstage here is cozy and fun. I
It
like
is fun.
it.
It's fun. And this is just to be honest, this is how you and I show up. We talk
It
about
is.
stuff like this all the time.
We just happen to be recording.
Micah, tell people that want to know more about you. Tell us where to find you. What are some of the things you do?
Here's what you need to know. This is me all the time.
Fair enough. Look for a jean jumpsuit.
Yeah.
That's you all the
Once
time.
that shows up in the mail, I'm pretty pumped about it. You can check me out on my website. Hello, Micah. Micah's hard to spell. It's Maika. HelloMicah.com or on Instagram at Strengths Talk.
I love it. And it took me like 3 years to figure out how to spell Micah. So
I know.
look at that. I love
So
it. I love it. But it's not intuitive for Susie.
No, it's creative, not intuitive.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So go hug your team. Go hug your team. This is going to be a thing.
I
We
think
need
this is
to
going to
talk
be
about
really
this
good.
more.
We just incubated this in a second. We need to
Totally.
talk more, Susie.
Okay. We got to do this more often. Thank you for joining me, Micah. Thanks for joining Leaders with Leverage. If somebody needs to hear this or your team does, forward it to them. Give them the gift of a hug. This is so great. There's so many applications for this. I
This is
love
so
it.
cool. Look
We're-
how amazing we are.
We are. We're bringing the hug back. Until next time. Thank you, Micah.
Thank you, Susie.